I want to welcome everyone, especially our scholars from Heritage here. We have a very special opportunity today. We're going to be hearing from some experts in assistive technology and universal design. These are folks from the Special Education Technology Center at Central Washington University. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panel, our guests here with us. And I will turn it over to all y'all to kind of introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, I'm Kristin Leslie. I'm the director of the Special Education Technology Center, which is a resource for Washington State educators around assistive technology. And we're housed at Central Washington University in Ellensburg, but we serve the entire state.
My name is Dan Herlihy. I'm an assistive technology specialist. My career was in technology integration and K-12 education with the assistive technology. And anything else you want me to add, Kristin?
That's good.
Besides, I was a national presenter.
Oh, that is exciting. That is exciting. Now, Dan, could you say that again? You said it was technology integration. Is that what you said?
Technology integration. So a lot of it was technology that is out there, and how do you integrate it into the classroom? How do students integrate it into their classes that they have? How do we make it work in the classroom, which is a bigger issue, because we can sit there and come up with scenarios and come up with solutions. But what I would spend a lot of my time doing is looking at the reality, because we can say we need this device and here's how it should work, but you can look in the classroom and go, it's not going to work because of this, and this. This is what we need to do to make it work. And sometimes it's not the first solution, it's the second, third, or fourth one down the line. And sometimes the solution is not the teacher, it's the student, empowering the student to, be able to take little control of their own accessibility and learning. And so training the student instead of always looking at it as we have to train the teacher.
Oh, that is wonderful. Now, Dan, did you present at conferences? You were a national speaker. What type of venues would you speak at?
Everywhere. Australia, Canada, the United States, pretty much every state. Closing the Gap and state conferences and ATIA, and kind of all around the country, and also for school systems, professional development. So.
Oh, that is phenomenal. How fortunate we are to have you here. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. Rose?
Hi, my name is Rose Roscoe, and I am trained as an occupational therapist, and I've worked in the schools my whole career with a specialty in assistive technology. And currently I'm just doing assistive technology as an AT specialist under Special Ed Tech Center. I've had a passion for universal design for learning and really been into it for about the last 12 years, trying to do a lot of professional development in that area, and really wanted to make sure technology is accessible to all students, which is what we're going to talk about today. So good segue. Thank you.
That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. We are very fortunate to have each of your expertise here and to help us learn about these topics here at Heritage. So we have a few scenarios that I wrote up, and you all gave me some feedback on these, and I think it'll be a great opportunity to talk. And if all of you think of maybe other scenarios that you've run into, you're welcome to interject as we go through here. Our main objective today is to learn about the resources that are out there for both assistive technology and understanding the universal design process, and how we can best support students in the classroom. Of course, our audience are these teacher preparation candidates who are coming up through Heritage University. And we just feel very fortunate to have each of your expertise here explaining this to us. Should I start out reading the scenarios?
Sure.
Okay, let's go with the first one. My students at Heritage, you will have these scenarios here. So if you want to follow along, this will be part of the assignment that I give you. So it says Fabiola has a significant hearing impairment and is only able to participate meaningfully with the help of special hearing aids. The hearing aids are connected to a wireless FM microphone system that is worn by the teacher. Sometimes Fabiola forgets to plug in the FM system into her hearing aids, and sometimes the teacher fails to recharge the device before leaving for home in the evening. Fabiola is also an emergent bilingual learner with early intermediate proficiency in English. What are some tools and strategies Fabiola and her teacher can use to make instruction comprehensible? Who'd like to tackle this first?
I know Rose is going to have a lot of AT solutions, so I would like to start off with a much more broad solution, especially the one dealing with connecting the hearing aid, the FM devices that night to charge up and all that. I'm used to working in the classroom with behavior management charts and things like that, and I think really simple at that point of kind of like the end of the day checklist for the student that they come up with the teacher with, here I've done this, I have my pack ready to go, whatever it may be. And, some of the things are my device is plugged in to be charged and things like that.
Yeah. So some students will have like a visual schedule or just a schedule written out, and that's part of that schedule.
We kind of forget that sometimes. Sometimes it's the simplest thing like that, especially if it's on the wall or somewhere really visible where, both the teacher and the student sees it, and there's something tied into it. 5 days in a row, you get a reward or something like that because we've got it plugged in. We start to look at all these solutions, and it's like, well, all it is what's going to make me remember type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have some other things I'll kick in after, but I just wanted to start off with, sometimes we look for harder solutions than we actually need. So.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a low-tech solution that we need, right?
Yeah. Something that comes to mind to me, yes, it's important that technology that was decided on for the student and available to the student is available and charged. At the same time, if the teacher perhaps is using something like Microsoft Translator, has started that up, and the student can have closed captioning on their own device in the language they choose, there he has something that addresses both the hearing as well as the language barrier as a universal design solution. If you think about it, that really supports other students also who may need translation in a different language or closed captioning in English to read along.
I think I've seen this, Kristin. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've seen this like in PowerPoint presentations. Is that what this is?
Yes, and it's also available as a separate app on a phone. So you can have it translating within PowerPoint. You can have it as a conversation translator on a phone. And also now there's an online website you can go to called translator.microsoft.com, and you can have translation going on in the background, but not showing up in the PowerPoint. But students can actually log into with a code on their own devices and see the teacher's voice being translated on their personal device in their language of choice without distracting the class with having closed captions up front. So you can do it both ways, and there's several options depending on what works best in that scenario. So anyway, yeah, it has great potential and possibilities in a variety of ways. So something we didn't know, John, on this particular scenario was the age of the student. So I was kind of thinking high school because you hadn't really addressed that yet, but some of the solutions, again, maybe lower tech with more pictures for an elementary student. But as you get into high school, teaching those students how to use something like Microsoft To Do or Google Keep on their phones, even if they carry the phones everywhere, so they can learn how to set up reminders and take responsibility for their own schedule. Make sure they remember that every night. I get home from school at 4 or 5 o'clock. I have an alarm go off to tell me to plug in that thing, or plug in before they leave school if it stays at school. So thinking of what do they have available? Is it a school device, a laptop? Is it a personal phone? Kind of like Dan said earlier, using the device that's realistically there in front of them and available, and then figuring out, is it Microsoft or is it Google, and what tools might be available. So we're talking multi-platform options, and then of course adding in Apple iOS as well. So those are all considerations.
Yeah, and I always kind of look at it as there are solutions, and for, just to air on to what Rose was talking about. If a school system said, well, we don't have that, a lot of schools tend to look and go, now what do we do? And they kind of see a wall, as opposed to, we're looking at the concept that she's talking about here, that there's captioning built into like everything now. And if you're trying to get something to work, you think even, you turn Siri on your phone and it's translating your voice. So, oh God, just about everything has this capability built into it. Microsoft Teams allows it, PowerPoint allows it, other programs allow it. So it's kind of, if we don't have this, believe me, there are a solution after solution after solution. So it's really just kind of looking, like Rose says, the first question is, what do you have? Are you Chrome? Are you Apple? Are you PC? And then it narrows it down and you start to look at, okay, now what's our next steps?
Do these solutions tend to be IT friendly?
Yes, they usually have to be approved by IT, right? Or IT has to make them available. So yes,
Sure.
That's where coordination between an AT specialist, special ed teacher, and IT department is really important. I just wanted to throw out one more thing in this scenario that was really important in the instructions. So assuming that they didn't have access to their device, their FM system that day, the other thing that would be really important for a student that has some ELL issues, language issues, is having lots of visuals. Because visuals are kind of universal, right? So if the teacher is using those visuals as part of the instruction, whether there's, pictures in the PowerPoint with captions or using low-tech pictures, art kind of things, or even the student, if they're going to do writing, finding a writing software that has built-in pictures with the words. So thinking then that universal UDL strategy is, if you use that picture and visual support for the whole class, that student's going to be able to benefit whether they have their FM system working or not that day. So just in a general way, thinking about visuals and then what kinds of assistive technology can you use to provide those visuals.
I'm glad that you bring that up, Rose, because a lot of times, whether our students have a documented disability or not, or whether they just have a learning difference, or whether it's being an English language learner, a lot of these resources could help anybody who has a learning difference, right? And so I'm glad that you bring that up. Anything else specifically on this scenario with Fabiola being both a student with a hearing impairment and being a language learner? All right, this was a real scenario that came from my background, and yes, indeed, it was a high school student. So thinking about that, glad that you asked. Second scenario, Manuel is a third grade boy with attention deficit disorder, a reading disability, and a long behavioral record. Previous teachers have described him as a holy terror. Testing data shows that Manuel has lagging foundational reading skills, especially phoneme segmentation and word recognition. When you meet with him for small group reading exercises, you observe he becomes quickly frustrated and acts out to avoid the task by distracting his peers. What are some tools and strategies you could use to help Manuel engage meaningful in reading activities?
All right,
I'd like to tackle this first.
I'll go with the basic one first before Rose gets into the AT. One of the things that came to mind was, he's being very distractible because he really doesn't know the answers, he can't read or whatever. And so one of the strategies that we've done in the classroom is work with him aside of kind of prepping him with some background knowledge of what is it we're going to be reading about, what's the story about. Maybe he doesn't have any idea, like let's say the story about polar bears, he doesn't even know what that is. So first of all, prepping him, what are we going to be talking about? And then I'm going to sit down and go, here is the question I'm going to be asking you. It's a special question just for you, and let's go over it and rehearse it now. And this is what, what's your answer going to be? So he's got something that he's going to contribute. So when I call on him, kind of like, now you're the star, he's got the answer and he feels good about himself. And so you're kind of starting small with, prepping him ahead of time so he knows he's got something good to add and he knows he's going to be right, as opposed to, I know I'm going to be failing, and so I don't want to be called on because I don't know what the answer is.
That's brilliant, Dan. We've talked about in my class a little bit about bringing in picture file cards before doing reading activities, just to help build some of that background knowledge and prime that pump just a little bit before we start the reading activity. I love that.
Good.
Go ahead, Rose.
I'll just say too, I'll kind of build on what Dan was saying. Another way for that student to get that that input ahead of time and kind of review before they're asked questions. If they struggle with actually, phonetically reading, that's where maybe those audiobooks could come in, where they can preview and listen to the book, whether someone reads it to them or whether they listen to it with some kind of audio reader, or just, a manual voice reader would be a good accommodation as a pre-activity to the academic output, and also just kind of reinforcing the content before you're requiring them to work on the phonetic task of reading itself. So just thinking of those text-to-speech options where, maybe it reads it letter by letter, or just, an audiobook with a human voice is always really engaging for students that are struggling with behavior. So that's one piece. Kristin, you want to jump in? I want to make sure we're kind of doing round robin here. So
okay, well, I was
what do you
thinking
think?
of the issue of always considering what the purpose of the learning experience is. And if that is for him to have access to the content, then you really would want to be providing audiobooks and other opportunities to gain access to the content rather than having him struggle through the reading. If it is to work on the reading instruction, then that's a different issue, but really knowing what the purpose of the lesson is.
I think
Yeah,
that's an
and that's
important
where
point. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
That's where that, high interest, low level reading materials really come in handy. And you want to get the student into a scenario where he can do some self-selecting of picking his own books and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I'll chime in on you there. So I had a resource I had thought about called EPIC, EPIC, exclamation point. And what's neat about that, it's kind of geared toward elementary students, but the student picks their genre of interest, and then you put in kind of the level that they're at now, and then they can choose to listen to their audiobooks, and they highlight the words as it reads. So they can choose to have their own reading experience in kind of a non-threatening environment that's of interest to them and at a level that feels comfortable, just to get that exposure going. And then I'll just say one other thing that kind of about the reading piece. There's some assessments out there where you can look at a student's reading level. So how do they read? If they're reading verbally, word by word, they're at one developmental level. But if they listen to a book and then have to answer questions about it, they might be performing at a much higher level. So there's an assessment I talk about called the UPAR, and it does just that. Maybe the student's functioning at the 3rd grade level, but if you give them access to an audiobook and then ask them questions, they might actually jump 2 or 3 grade levels in their comprehension. So if you think about how you're holding a student back by locking them into, you have to read this, at your developmental level, and you can go no further until you master this, they might be actually able to comprehend 2 levels higher. So it's really important to assume competence. If students aren't phonetically able to read, they may be able to comprehend and access text at a much higher level. That's where assistive technology is really important for those students. So I'll stop there.
And I think Rose, a lot of this it becomes more and more important as you climb up those grade levels, as we see these gaps growing as they get older. Having access to these things is important. And I wanted to return briefly to something that Kristin said. Understanding the purpose of the activity. Are we trying to teach the phonics here, or are we going for the content and the comprehension? Understanding that difference. And for our pre-service teachers, a lot of reading curriculums come with very well-developed foundational instructional reading materials, right? Typically, especially in the early elementary grades, we have very structured methods and very prescribed methods for teaching reading to children. And it's important that we don't necessarily stray from those research-based materials. But as we get into, rather than learning to read and reading for learning, having access to these audiobooks or other materials to make it accessible, it becomes increasingly important and increasingly powerful in impacting the students. Yeah. All right, should we move on to the third scenario? Or is there more that we need to say about reading?
Well, can I just say one small piece? So Kristin
Please
and I
do.
are both occupational therapists, right? So to address kind of the behavior, attention, movement, holy terror part of that one, we would want to look at the environment, right? And giving them some choices on where they sit, how they move, not making them sit in one chair with their hands folded and do what they're told, but maybe have a safe zone or a calm down zone. And then kind of going back to the visuals with a consistent structure and routine. So they know first I'm going to do this, then I get to do this, and it's being consistent with visual reminders, having them going through the tasks and having some kind of reinforcement when they complete the task. So just to round it out, yes, the reading is our central focus, but they may not ever get to the reading if we don't address the behavior and the environment and help them self-regulate so that their body is just right and ready to learn. So just a quick input. We had to get my OTPs in.
Oh, well said. Well said. I'm thinking about my own classroom right now, and I think I'd like my students to understand that the idea of avoiding learning and using disruption as a method of maybe avoiding difficult tasks does not end in third grade. We see that all the way up through the grades. And just thinking about in my own instruction, the importance of maybe having a schedule written up on the board so we know what's happening, to create this very predictable environment, giving students these options so that they have routine, they know the expectations, and they have choices. Well said. I'm glad that we dealt with that. Anything else with the reading scenario? So let's jump into scenario 3 here. Wei Hong is a 7-year-old Cantonese-speaking newcomer with rapidly developing oral proficiency in English. Even though she engages readily with friends at recess, she is shy and withdrawn during instructional activities that require academic conversations and oral exchange of ideas. Even though she does not appear to have a disability, her writing is developing slowly, and she just mastered the Roman alphabet. Her recognition of letter sounds is better than her writing, but she is unable to decode multisyllabic words. What are some tools and strategies you could use to help Wei Hong participate in language production activities, especially academic conversations and writing? Dan, you want to jump in for the big picture again?
When I looked at the scenario, I think of the student trying to get just output as far as writing, and at where she's at, and especially because we're talking about a 7-year-old, I started thinking of some of the programs like Clicker, and where I've got built-in word prediction, but I also have picture support as I'm typing to kind of support, this is the word I was looking for. So I've got word prediction helping me get some writing output quicker and kind of giving me some guesses. Is this what you're trying to write? And then with text to speech to hear back what I've written so far, but also some picture support in Clicker 8, where I'm typing the word, for example, the word cat, and I can have the picture of the cat come up with the word, helping me with, yep, that's the word I was looking for, and making me feel a little more confident in my writing, and like I said, I'm looking at a 7-year-old, and I'm also thinking of some of the things that are built into, for example, Microsoft Word, where we've got text to speech built in. We can have nouns and verbs and things like that color coded as they're typed out, and as they're read aloud.
And did you know?
Go ahead, Rose.
And Microsoft Word does have picture support built in to Immersive Reader now too. So
that's right, because they have the Mayor Johnson symbol support, symbol library built in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
and that was a really good example of, instead of having to get a commercial thing, what do we already have? Well, our school is already using Microsoft Office, for example, and not realizing what we have in front of us. Go
exactly.
ahead,
a lot of people
Well,
don't
what came to mind to me, and Rose, you've talked a lot about this tool, is Book Creator. In basically having multiple ways for the student to express themselves. And Book Creator is a great app, and also it's a online tool where the student can use pictures, can use voice notes, can use typing. What else, Rose? Video, maybe. Anyway, to create
all of
what they
it.
want to say.
Yeah.
And so you're giving multiple options to then produce writing, to express themselves.
And this is where she puts in a picture maybe and only does a caption and then records her voice. So the caption gets her writing, initial writing, and recording her voice is telling, for example, reading, a paragraph or something like that. So she feels good both ways.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Dan, I think that's important because, there's a difference, I think, between having an academic conversation where in real time you're having to think and respond immediately, and that shuts a lot of English learners down. But if you have that time to think, and then like you say, you're recording yourself, and you even have the opportunity of maybe going back and re-recording yourself to make sure you have it right, I think that'd be a great opportunity for decreasing the affective anxiety and increasing opportunities for practice.
Exactly. It takes away that fear of I can't write, where we're going to write a story today. I can't do this. Well, today you're only going to write one word. Oh, really? Well, I can do that. Yeah, we're going to call it a caption. Okay, so here's the picture. Tell me one word about it. Horses. Now let's record what you have to say. And yet the kid was, okay, now we have to stop, because the reality is I could go on all day long. And so the next day is, okay, we're going to extend that caption to 3 words. We're going to extend, and then, over time, it's building up the confidence, but the student feels like they're being heard. And the reality is, what did you do today? I wrote a book, even though they wrote 1 word, because they have a picture, they have their story, and in their mind, and the reality is, they wrote a book. Because what is a book? It's communicating ideas, and they're just doing it in many different alternate formats.
I have one addition to that. So Chris and I talked about the beauty of this recording your voice, like in this book Creator, is that this little girl could record in her native language. So she was struggling with English to a certain level and wasn't secure in that yet. Why wouldn't she be able to record? I mean, maybe some in the English she knows, but then we wouldn't limit her to that. She could have pictures that are native to her language, and she could do some speaking. And then if you wanted to interpret that, another thing in Microsoft Word, we're talking built-in tools, if she's in Word Online, she could dictate in her language, and then it will translate to English or English to her language. So you've got that in there too. And then I have one more idea before I have to go. So I'm not a speech therapist, but I work very closely with speech therapists. And there's something called core boards, core communication boards. And we're talking like a big poster size board of language symbols that like you'd see on a communication device, but they're kind of in a way that you could use it in front of a full classroom, and you can be pointing to words as you say things, and words would have pictures attached. And this is a way that would support students with emerging reading, students with communication issues, and students with emerging language differences. And it puts everyone on the level playing field, and it's really fun to point to pictures while you're talking and try to find nouns, verbs, and descriptors. So that's called AAC core boards, and you can make large printable ones that can be used as a full class teaching tool in general ed. It's a universal tool now. So that's my final thoughts on that one. Thank you.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Now, Rose, would teachers be able to access something like that, say on a Promethean board or electronically as well, or are they all physical print ones?
Probably. I mean, if their school district, like in my prior district, we had a PDF of it that probably could be projected on a Promethean board. So yes, I think either or would be great.
Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Kristin, we could take just a few minutes just to talk about the resources that are available there at your center, and maybe get Dan's take. Thank you, Rose.
So the Special Ed Tech Center is funded by the Office of Public Instruction, and we are a support to all educators in Washington State. And we support educators by providing consultations. So have a student or a classroom issue and you want to talk through what technology might be helpful, you can access a consultation request on our website. We just hop on Zoom with you, or we can do an in-person visit. We have webinars, usually Monday through Thursday, just about all different types of like Book Creator we talked about, and like other tools we've been talking about today, Translator. We have webinars on these things just to build your knowledge of what's available. Then we have a lending library, which mostly has more tools for students with physical disabilities who need to access computers, iPads, Chromebooks in alternative ways. We do have some things like reading pens, where a student can have their textbooks and be using a reading pen with earbuds to hear the text.
I think that is phenomenal. Dan, any last words for us?
Yeah, I think one of the things we always need to keep in mind is technology is never the only answer, that it's always paired with motivation for the student, the environment they happen to be in, and really what's appropriate and how it's used. And I think the example I gave earlier with Book Creator, where we're really motivating the student that you can do this, and we're starting small. We're not starting at, this is what everybody else is doing. Well, here's an alternate way of doing it. And keeping those things in mind, that just because everybody else is writing on a piece of paper, it doesn't mean the student has to be writing on a piece of paper. What is the ultimate goal? Is it them to write a story? You know, and I make a joke sometimes in a workshop. How does Stephen King write a story? Does he walk around going, it was a dark and stormy night, and then does he hand off the voice recorder and go, just Lang, can you transcribe that for me? And everybody kind of laughs. I go, so did he write the story? You know, and I say, well, and that's what we need to start to consider, you know, what is it we really want from the student? And just because, you know, they're using a pencil on a paper, there are multiple means of, well, that's the idea of UDL, multiple means of, you know, representation, expression,